She looked me dead in the eyes across the Christmas dinner table, wine glass in hand, smug smile on her face, every family member watching, and she said it like it was the funniest joke she'd ever told. 34, no kids, no husband, no life. Honestly, Claire, pathetic doesn't even begin to cover it. The table went quiet. My mother looked down at her plate. My uncle pretended to cough. And my sister, Natalie, she just sat there, waiting for me to crumble, waiting for my lip to tremble, for my eyes to fill up, for me to excuse myself to the bathroom the way I had done every other Christmas before this one. But this time, I didn't. This time, I set my fork down slowly. I folded my napkin. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I smiled the quietest, most dangerous smile I have ever smiled in my 34 years of life. And I said, "Natalie, you want to talk about kids at this table? Here, in front of everyone? Are you absolutely sure that's what you want to do right now?" She laughed. She actually laughed. "What are you going to do, Claire? Cry again?" "No," I said. "I'm going to tell everyone at this table something that I should have said 8 years ago." And the smile dropped from her face so fast it was like watching a window shatter in slow motion. Because she knew. She had always known. The baby she had been raising for 8 years, the daughter she called hers, the child she bragged about at every family gathering, the little girl she paraded around like proof of her perfect life, was not hers in any way that the universe had intended. She was mine. And Natalie knew it. And she had spent 8 years praying I would never say it out loud. This is what happened when I finally did. Before I go any further, please subscribe, because what I'm about to share took me 8 years of silence, 8 years of swallowing something so enormous it almost broke me. And if there is even one person watching this who is carrying a secret this heavy, who is being mocked by someone who owes them everything, I need you to stay. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I am not alone in this. Subscribe, and let's get through this together. My name is Claire, I'm 34 years old, and I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Boston's South End. The kind of apartment with exposed brick and good light, and a window seat where I sit with my coffee every morning, and tell myself I have a good life. And I do. I do have a good life. But there is a version of my life that nobody in my family knows about. Or rather, there is a version that only one person knows about, and she has used that knowledge as a weapon against me for the better part of a decade. Her name is Natalie. She is my older sister by 3 years, married to a man named Tom, who genuinely believes he married a saint, mother to a beautiful 8-year-old girl named Madeline, owner of a house in the suburbs of Connecticut, with a double garage and a hydrangea bush out front that she photographs every June like it's evidence of how well her life is going. Natalie has always needed to win. Even as children, she needed to be the smartest, the prettiest, the most loved. She needed our mother Barbara's attention the way most people need oxygen, desperately, constantly, and at the expense of everyone around her. I learned early to stay small around Natalie. I learned to take up less space. I became the quiet one, the invisible one. The one who got good grades but didn't make a fuss about it, who had friends but didn't talk about them too much, who fell in love for the first time at 22 and kept it private, because I had learned by then that anything I loved became something Natalie could use against me. His name was Valdez. He was 26 when I met him at a bookshop in Cambridge, where we both reached for the same copy of the same novel at the same time. He had dark eyes and paint-stained fingers, and he laughed at things most people didn't find funny, which I found immediately magnetic. We dated for 2 years, and I fell completely, helplessly in love with him. I never told my family how serious it was. I should have. But I didn't. And at 24, when I found out I was pregnant, I sat alone in my apartment bathroom with 2 pink lines on a stick, and I felt, and this is the part that nobody ever talks about honestly, I felt happy. Terrified, yes. Uncertain, absolutely. But underneath all of it, somewhere deep and private and real, I felt happy. I called Valdez. He came over that same night. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, and I watched his face go through 10 different emotions in about 90 seconds. And then he said the thing that quiet, gentle people sometimes say when they are scared and wrong, and not yet the person they will eventually become. He said he wasn't ready. He said he was sorry. He said he would support me whatever I decided. But I could see, in the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes, that what he was actually saying was, please don't ask me to stay, so I didn't. I told him I would handle it. I told him I was fine. I told him I would let him know what I decided, and then I walked him to the door, and I closed it behind him, and I sat on my kitchen floor and cried so hard I couldn't breathe. He transferred to a firm in Seattle 3 months later. We texted twice after that. I was 5 weeks along when I first told Natalie. Not because I wanted to. Because she came to visit unexpectedly and I was sick and pale, and the crackers on my kitchen counter were a giveaway to someone who was herself pregnant at the time, 7 months along, glowing in the way that pregnancy magazines tell you you're supposed to glow. She sat down across from me and she looked at me with something I had never seen on her face before. Softness. Claire, she said, tell me. And I did. I told her everything. About Valdez, about the bathroom, about the table, about the door. I told her I didn't know what I was going to do. I told her I was scared. She reached across the table and held my hand. She said, whatever you decide, I'm here. I'm your sister. That's what sisters are for. And for one moment, just one, I believed her. I believed Natalie was capable of that. She was 7 months pregnant then. Her husband Tom had a good job. They had just bought the house in Connecticut. She was living the life she had always planned in the exact order she had always planned it. The baby was a girl. They had already picked the name, Madeline Angela O'Connor Walsh. Named after Tom's grandmother and Natalie's favorite saint. I used to think the irony of that name would crush me. I was 26 weeks along when Natalie's world collapsed. I was in my apartment reading when my phone rang at 2:17 in the morning. The name on the screen said Tom. I answered immediately. His voice was barely a voice. It was something underneath a voice, some broken thing that existed in the place where a voice usually lives. He told me there had been complications during the delivery. He told me Natalie had gone into labor 6 weeks early. He told me the baby, little Madeline Angela O'Connor Walsh, had been born and had lived for 47 minutes, and then her heart had stopped, and the doctors had done everything, and it wasn't enough. He told me Natalie was asking for me. I drove 3.5 hours in the dark. I still don't remember most of that drive. I remember the highway. I remember a gas station. I remember my hands on the steering wheel shaking so badly I had to pull over twice. When I got to the hospital, I found Natalie in a room that smelled like antiseptic and grief, her face so pale and so destroyed that I almost didn't recognize her. Tom was sitting in the corner with his head in his hands. A nurse named Layla was moving quietly around the room, not saying anything, just being present in the gentle and purposeful way that some nurses have, that makes them feel almost holy. I sat next to Natalie's bed. She took my hand. She didn't cry. She had already moved past crying into somewhere further and darker. She said, I can't do it again, Claire. My body can't do it again. The doctors said it would be too dangerous. I held her hand and I said nothing, because there was nothing to say. And then, very quietly, she said, your baby is alive. ARS. I looked at her. Your baby is healthy, she said. And I'm your sister, and I love you, and I know you're scared, and I know you don't know what you're going to do. She turned her head and looked at me with those hollow, devastated eyes. Let me raise her, Claire, she whispered. Let me be her mother, and we will tell everyone, your family, my family, everyone, that you had a miscarriage. That I found out about it the same night I lost mine. 2 sisters losing their babies on the same terrible night. No one will question it. No one will dig. Extander. The room was so quiet. The monitors beeped softly in the hallway. Tom was still sitting in the corner. Nurse Layla had stepped out. And I sat there in the 5 a.m. silence of a hospital room that smelled like loss. And I looked at my sister's destroyed face. And I thought about Valdez in Seattle, and my apartment in Boston, and the terrified, uncertain, private happiness I had felt in my bathroom with those 2 pink lines. And I made the worst and the most loving decision of my life. I said yes. I need to pause here for just a moment, because I know what some of you are thinking. I know some of you want to shake me through the screen. I know some of you understand exactly why I said yes, because you have loved someone so completely that their pain became your decision. If this story is hitting something real in you, please subscribe, because I need you here for what comes next. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I am not alone in this. Don't go anywhere. The justice hasn't happened yet. Here's what they don't tell you about making a sacrifice like that. They don't tell you about the Tuesday afternoons. About sitting in your office in Boston, I work in healthcare administration, quiet cubicle, good benefits, and opening your sister's Instagram to see a photo of a little girl in a yellow raincoat jumping in a puddle, captioned, "My heart, my whole heart." #Madeline Monday. Dauka. They don't tell you about Christmas mornings when a 7-year-old with your own eyes runs across a living room in her pajamas, and you have to sit very still and keep your face very neutral, and be Claire, the aunt, the single one, the one without a life. They don't tell you about the first time she called Natalie mommy and how the word landed in your chest like something with weight and edges. I told myself it was okay. I told myself I had made a choice, and choices have to be lived with, and Madeline was loved and safe and happy, and that was what mattered. I told myself that Natalie was grateful. For the first year or two she would call me, and there would be this warmth in her voice, this softness that felt like the Natalie from the hospital room. She would say things like, "She looked at a butterfly today for 3 whole minutes, Claire, 3 whole minutes. She's extraordinary." And I would sit in my apartment on my window seat and close my eyes and just breathe through it. But gradually something shifted. As the years went on and Madeline became more fully, completely, undeniably Natalie's, the warmth in my sister's voice began to cool. The calls became shorter. And then the calls stopped. And the Christmas dinners became something different. Natalie stopped looking at me with softness. She started looking at me the way she had always looked at me before that 2 a.m. hospital room, like I was something lesser, something to be measured against her and found lacking. I was 28 with no children, then 30 with no children, then 32 with no children. Every Christmas, the comments got sharper. "Have you thought about freezing your eggs, Claire? The window isn't open forever. SLS. You know, Tom's colleague Simon is single, but honestly at your age the pickings are slim. I just worry about you. I mean, who's going to take care of you when you're old? Our mother Barbara laughed at these comments. Not cruelly. Our mother isn't cruel. She's just passive in the way that allows cruelty to fill the silence. Uncle Henry would change the subject. Tom would look at his plate. Our family friend Susan O'Connor would give me a sympathetic glance and top up my wine glass, which I appreciated more than she'll ever know. But nobody stopped it. Nobody ever said, "Natalie, enough." So it kept going. Year after year, it kept going. And I sat there and took it, because what was the alternative? To say, "Actually, Natalie, I did have a baby and you took her, and I told everyone she died so you could have the life you wanted while I sat here alone. Would you like me to bring that up over the roast potatoes?" So I took it. Until Christmas this year. When Madeline was 8 years old and looked more like me than Natalie would ever admit, and sat at the table in a red velvet dress eating her Brussels sprouts one at a time with great concentration and seriousness. And Natalie looked across the table and said, 34, no kids, no husband, no life. Honestly, Claire, pathetic doesn't even begin to cover it. I need you to understand something about what happened in me in that moment. It wasn't rage. Rage is hot and fast and messy, and what I felt was none of those things. What I felt was cold and clear and old, like something that had been sitting in the back of a very dark room for 8 years, waiting very patiently for someone to open the door. The table had gone quiet. Madeline had looked up from her Brussels sprouts with wide, uncertain eyes. This perceptive, intelligent little girl who somehow always knew when the air in a room had changed. And I looked at my sister. And I smiled. I smiled the way you smile when you have been holding a door closed against a flood for 8 years, and you finally decide to let go. Natalie, I said, Adder, you want to talk about kids at this table? Here, in front of everyone? Are you absolutely sure that's what you want to do right now? Addery. She laughed. She picked up her wine glass. What are you going to do, Claire? Cry again? No, I said. I'm going to tell everyone at this table something that I should have said 8 years ago. And her face. God, her face. The wine glass paused halfway to her lips. Claire, she said, and her voice had something in it I had never heard from Natalie in my entire life. Fear. Care, don't. A.R. 8 years ago, I said, and my voice was very calm. Anna, I was 26 weeks pregnant, Natalie knew. She was the only person I had told. I.R. Claire. Natalie's voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. Under the table, I could see her hand gripping Tom's arm. This is not the place. You told me I had a miscarriage, said my mother, confused, looking between us. You both lost your babies the same night. No, I said, and only one of us did, A.R. The table was absolutely silent. Uncle Henry had stopped chewing. Susan O'Connor had set down her fork. Tom, who I had always liked, who I had always privately felt sorry for in ways I couldn't explain, Tom was looking at Natalie with an expression that I couldn't quite read from across the table. Madeline was very still. The night Natalie lost her baby, I said, Aunt, was the same night she asked me to let her raise mine. She told me her body couldn't survive another pregnancy. She told me we would tell everyone I had miscarried. She told me no one would question it. Claire, please. I said yes, I continued. Errative, because I was scared and alone, and the father had left, and because my sister was sitting in a hospital room at 5 a.m, looking like her whole world had ended, and I loved her, and I gave her my daughter. The word daughter landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. I watched the ripples move. My mother's hand came up to cover her mouth. Tom very slowly turned to look at Natalie. Natalie was staring at me, and for the first time in 8 years, she had absolutely nothing to say. And Madeline. Madeline had turned her serious, perceptive, Brussels sprout face toward me. And she was looking at me the way she had always looked at me, a little longer than everyone else, a little more carefully, like she was trying to work out the answer to a question she hadn't yet learned how to ask. I'm not going to tell you that the dinner ended gracefully. It did not. Natalie stood up and said things I will not repeat. Tom asked her very quietly to sit down. She did not sit down. My mother started crying. Uncle Henry took Madeline to the living room where they sat together on the couch, and he let her control the TV remote, which was, I thought, exactly the right instinct. Natalie left. Tom stayed. And he sat across from me at the now-cleared Christmas table, with 2 cups of coffee between us, and he said, How much of this is documented? Ow. I looked at him. I need to know, he said, for Madeline, for all of us, I need to know what exists, RC. I had not come to that Christmas dinner entirely unprepared. Because here is the thing about 8 years of silence and patience. You have a lot of time to think. You have a lot of time to talk to people like my friend Joe Mahone, who is a family law attorney in Boston. A lot of time to talk to my therapist Dante, who helped me understand that carrying a secret this size was not noble, it was erosive, and that I deserved to have options. A lot of time to quietly, carefully, legally protect myself. I reached into my bag. I placed a document on the table. It was notarized. It had been drafted by Joe 3 years earlier at my request, and updated twice since then. It outlined the agreement Natalie and I had made in that hospital room, the biological facts, and my legal rights as Madeline's birth mother. Rights I had never waived, never signed away, because in the fog of that 5 a.m. hospital room, no one had thought to make me sign anything. No one had thought to make it official. Because Natalie had believed I would never say a word. Tom read it twice. He set it down. He looked at me for a long time. And then he said, "What do you want, Claire? Actually want, not to punish Natalie. What do you want for you and for Madeline?" And I told him the truth. I didn't want to take Madeline away from the only home she had ever known. I didn't want to blow up her life for the sake of my own grief. Tom was a good father. Madeline was, despite everything, a loved and stable child. What I wanted was to be known. What I wanted was for Madeline, when she was old enough, and she would be old enough sooner than any of us were ready for, because she was that kind of child, to know the truth and to be allowed to decide what it meant to her. What I wanted was for Natalie to never, in my presence or hers, reduce me to pathetic again. What I wanted was to put the secret down. 8 years is a long time to carry something alone. I was ready to put it down. Tom filed for a post-nuptial disclosure agreement, essentially a legally binding family arrangement, that formally acknowledged Madeline's biological parentage and established my rights to a relationship with her going forward. Joe Mahone walked me through every page. Natalie did not fight it. I think in the end she understood that fighting it would only require her to explain to a judge why a notarized document existed, why no adoption had ever been formally processed, and why she had spent 8 years calling someone else's biological child her own, without any legal standing to do so. Our family attorney, a careful, silver-haired man named Fergus Lance, who had been handling our family's affairs since before I was born, told her very gently that her position was not strong. She signed. She did not call me afterward. She has not called me since. Tom calls occasionally. He sends me photos of Madeline. Last month she drew a picture in art class, a house with a blue door and 2 figures standing outside it. She told her teacher one of them was her mom and one of them was her other mom in Boston. Her teacher called Tom. Tom called me. He was crying a little when he told me. I was crying too, but I didn't say so. My mother Barbara called me a week after Christmas. She was very quiet on the phone. She said she didn't know what to say, so she was just going to say she was sorry. She said she was sorry she had laughed at Natalie's comments over the years. She said she was sorry she had never asked why I seemed to get a little smaller every Christmas. She said, "I should have seen it, Claire. A mother should have seen it." I told her it wasn't her fault. I meant it. I told her I had hidden it very carefully. I meant that too. Our friend Susan O'Connor, who had been topping up my wine glass at those Christmas tables for 8 years, sent me a card in January, handwritten, 3 pages. The last line said, "You are the least pathetic person I have ever had the privilege of knowing." I have it on my refrigerator. Madeline's 9th birthday is in March. Tom has asked me if I would like to come. I said yes. I am going to bring her a book. She is a reader, this quiet, serious, perceptive little girl who can stare at a butterfly for 3 whole minutes, and I think she would like something with real depth to it, something that doesn't talk down to her. I don't know what our relationship will look like as she grows up. I don't know what words she'll eventually want to use for what I am to her. I know she is surrounded by people who love her, Tom and Barbara, and Uncle Henry with his TV remote, and Susan O'Connor who sends cards to people who need them. I know she has my eyes. I know she has something else of mine too, something I can't name precisely, a quality of attention, of stillness, of looking at the world a little longer than everyone else, trying to work out the answer to questions she hasn't yet learned to ask. I think she is going to be extraordinary. I think she always was. As for me, I still have my apartment in the South End, the exposed brick and the good light and the window seat where I have my coffee every morning. I have my job in healthcare administration. I have Joe Mahone who makes me laugh and who showed up for me in ways that a person doesn't forget. I have Dante, my therapist, who keeps reminding me that surviving something quietly is still surviving. I have a life. A real, full, mind-shaped life. And for the first time in 8 years, I am carrying it upright. Nobody at this table will ever look at me across a Christmas dinner and call me pathetic again. Not because I threatened anyone. Not because I shouted. Not because I shattered something in anger. But because I finally, quietly, gently, irrevocably told the truth. And the truth turned out to be enough. The truth always turns out to be enough. It just sometimes takes 8 years to be ready to say it. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. I mean that more than I can express in a video description or a comment section. Because the people who watch all the way to the end are the people who understand that real stories don't always end with screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes justice is quiet. Sometimes it's a document on a table. Sometimes it's a 9-year-old girl who draws 2 figures outside a blue-doored house and tells her teacher one of them lives in Boston. If any part of this story touched something in you, if you have ever been the one sitting at that Christmas table, swallowing something enormous, being called less than you are by someone who owes you everything, please subscribe. Because there are more stories like this one, and I need to know that when I tell them, someone is listening. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I am not alone in this. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Comment "I stayed" if you watched all the way to the end. And if you have a story of your own, of patience, of quiet justice, of finally putting something down after carrying it too long, I hope you find your Christmas table moment. I hope you smile. I hope it's enough. Because you were never pathetic. You were just waiting. Claire. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Comment below. Have you ever kept a secret to protect someone who didn't deserve your silence? Share this if you know someone who needs to hear it today. RL.